Welcome back, guys. C++ Library, Episode 2. My name is Matt, and we're going to expand things a little bit and talk about how to continue a library here. If you haven't seen the first episode, I would highly recommend watching it. Otherwise, you're going to be a little lost, but we're going to get into a little initial theory here. That way, if you want to scale ahead and move on before I get to every new episode, because I'm going to cover things carefully, well, there's some things you can do, and that's what I want to introduce this episode with. That and a bit of an explanation for where I've been. I know a lot of you are kind of like waiting on me to do stuff or respond or whatever, but I've been a little distracted lately, so I just haven't had much time between working on my game and a couple other new things. I've basically not had much time to mess with YouTube or the community, so I apologize. So if you want to support me in my new things and me making my game, putting a lot of time in over there, join the Patreon. Supporting these videos always helps too. And becoming a member on the channel always helps. All right, so with that out of the way, since I don't have sponsors, I feel like I gotta push that a little bit. Please sign up, help me out. Anything helps. We're gonna talk about libraries. All right, so what I like to do when I'm hypothesizing how to do a project and structuring it is I like to look at other projects. Now, this might sound obvious, but it's a pretty nice step that you can take for free because you can just look for open source projects on GitHub. For example, we made a mention of the Poco library, which is a networking library for C++. It's open source, cross-platform. Great. Open source cross-platform library, C++. Well, where's the source? It's right on GitHub. You can just search it up. Just search Poco. You will find it. So here it is. And this is, pretty battle-tested, forked a lot, worked on a lot, etc. It's pretty good standards here, presumably. Better than, for example, you starting out. You don't know what to do. The people here probably know what to do, for example. So you can study any of these open source libraries. I'm just using Poco here as my example, but there are tons. Just Google C++ library and open source or something like that. You'll find all kinds of references all over the place. Okay, so let's take a look at their structure. They've got a bunch of folders, but this is the Poco library, and you're going to have questions. So here's the kind of questions that I would ask when organizing this library. Okay, so there's a main Poco library, so to speak, right? That's in here somewhere. And what's all this other stuff? There's all kinds of stuff. Active record, Apache connector, CPP parser, CPP unit, crypto, data, etc., all the way down to zip. And then we got build, Cmake, contrib, more folders. It just seems like a lot of stuff. But most of this is basically things we don't even need to think about, is what it comes down to. We just kind of need to get an overall overview of what's going on here. All right, so here's the overview. I'm just going to give you the overview. I'm not going to explain every little thing because that would take forever. Then we got a bunch of files. All right, so I guess we'll start from the top. All these files, all these folders are just different things the project might use at times. But in this case, they have chosen to make their main source go under foundation. You see this pretty commonly in bigger projects with a lot of kind of side things and little, these might be external libraries that they're bringing in and stuff, or just external code that isn't necessarily Poco related, but more universal. So the main foundation, we'll click on foundation. We got all the Poco stuff. We got the source. Here's their CPP. Here's all what they all compiled down to with Poco's specific stuff for Poco. All right, there's a lot in here. There's a lot of files, a lot of CPP files, and it goes on and on and on. So if you wanted to clone this project and get into a workflow, you could probably understand it a little more, but just know that, this is basically all the private source. All the, how we had an area that we said, this is the stuff we're putting here is private, the end user will never see it. That's basically what this part is when you're using the library. Of course, you can see here because it's open source, but after you build the library, you don't ever look at this again. What you look at is here in the include. So I went back, here's the include stuff, just like we were doing, same style, include, and then the name. Well, I guess we haven't got to that. We'll get to that. And this is all their public headers. So when you link this library, you're going to need these headers to tell you what functions are available. That's all these public headers do, is they tell you what functions are available. So there should be, well, nearly everything they want you to be able to call is in these includes. So that's how they have it organized. They've got it in a foundation. So let's back up a little bit to the top level of Poco again. So we can kind of assume that all these other folders are just side things. They might be, CPP unit is a testing framework, so they're supporting that. So you'll find that in a lot of projects. Now, I want to be careful about how I say this, but you'll find that there's a lot of bloat. And I don't mean that in a negative way, because, like, for example, CPP unit has nothing to do with networking. So if you clone this repo, you're getting stuff like CPP unit, which is a testing framework, but it has nothing to do with networking. So why am I making a point of this? Well, you just got to be careful because you can accidentally overbloat your project and it just becomes more confusing unnecessarily. I don't think they've done that here necessarily, but I'm just making the point of there is a lot of code in here that really has nothing to do with what the actual project is. It's just various little support. They want to support unit testing for people that are building on it. All right, that's actually great. There's nothing wrong with that. But from an end user's perspective, if you literally just want to use the network features and you don't want to be like working on this library, you have no use for a lot of this stuff potentially. So just keep that in mind. Because these MongoDB, these appear to just be basically side resources, things required to compile their library. But the main foundation's still here. So can kind of consider all these other folders as just various other requirements. Now, and keep in mind that some of them just aren't required. They're just here just because it's a GitHub repo and a bunch of people touch it and want to document it and stuff. So they got docs. You'll probably want to look at those to figure out exactly how to use this, of course. And maybe you'll do the same thing for your library at some point. You'll make some kind of doc setup. And there's a lot of different ways of doing that. Maybe we'll get to that eventually. All right. Well, let's move on a little bit. Yeah, they've got their build folder in here. Now, I find a lot of this to be a little weird, but they've got configs that they want to have saved for certain situations. So a lot of really wide support here, a very, very robust library, we'll say. So it's probably going to be a lot bigger than what most of us are going to solo work on. But if you contribute to stuff like this, you'll want to kind of understand what's going on, what you can mess with, and why it's here. So this is a great place to kind of dig in, look at things specifically, ask questions, and learn more. It's almost a free university in a way, and chances are you can ask a lot of these developers stuff that you get stuck on and they might help you. I have no guarantee of that. A lot of them probably don't have time, but a lot of them also, that's what they're doing. They're basically on here to help people. That's why they work on open source a lot of times. So don't be too afraid. Be kind. Be cool. All right, let's move on to these files, the non-folder files. Now they've got a wide variety of build command stuff, a readme, a make file, and a Cmake list.txt. So they're supporting Cmake. They're supporting just raw make as well, probably for Linux stuff. Let's take a quick look. Cygwin, GW, so that would be Windows right there, but cross-platform shells there. And just a basic make file. They've got some interesting logic in here. No need to really go over the whole thing, but the point is they're supporting multiple build systems in here, so this is bigger than it normally is. Like for our project we're working on, we're literally just Cmake only because that's going to handle everything. And it'll work on Linux, it'll work on Mac, it'll work on Windows. You should pretty easily be able to convert it across any other new platform you want. But they've just got a lot of old support here. I think this library's been around so long that they probably got stuff that maybe is not used much, but there's probably just a few people out there still using some of this old stuff. So, there's stuff like that. Okay, environment.bat, that's for Windows. Environment.sh, that's going to be for Linux/Mac. So they've kind of got multi-support, multiple files for just building. Now, of course, you want to read the instructions for exactly what they expect you to do to build this, and that's what I would do. But generally, it's something like run configure, or you run, I don't know. You just check the README, I would say, in general. But basically, they're going to tell you to run specific commands, and these commands are basically, that's pretty straightforward. They're usually just the boilerplate, the stuff you would type in your console, but you'll never remember because it's a lot of little jargon. Like, what was that exact command again? It was this: build when 150, build shared both when, this whole array of stuff. You're never gonna remember that. That's why they save them in files and just run the file, rather than. So that's a thing. a lot of this stuff is somewhat optional. So I know this has been a little bit of a broad example, but I just want to give you like a very wide perspective here, to know that it's not always the same. You got to kind of understand a lot of different things that people tend to do with libraries. All right, so where does that leave us? Oh, I want to look at one other thing. Where do they do their testing? So let's go to the top level. Do they have a tests folder? No, no tests folder. So I think their individual tests are in each of these. So let's check Foundation, Poco. Okay, they've got a test suite. Let's see, what do they do with their test suite? They've got source and data. They've got make files. They've got Visual Studio Project stuff, and they've got a few other things. All right, so what are they actually doing here? I would guess that they're probably using CPP unit somewhere since they've got it elsewhere. But, really I'd have to like dig in and see what they're doing to even know. Let's see if Cmake even says exactly, because we should see it linked to whatever they're using. Okay, here we go. So we got a target link libraries. They link it to the Poco Foundation and CPP unit. So these, yeah, their test suite here is just using CPP unit. I tend to use native unit tests or just C test, but there's a lot of different test suites out there. There's of course CPP unit like they're using here. You could kind of copy what they're doing here and go with that workflow, or you could use something else. So there's also Google Test, Catch 2. I've used a lot of them. They're all approximately the same. I would say use whatever one you find most user friendly, and don't worry about it too much, because generally they all do the same thing. They test if your results were what you said they were. It's a very straightforward kind of Boolean logic to make a test suite when you think about it. But we're not gonna dig in any further here. So we want to think about, where does that leave us with our library? How do we want to organize ours? That's where you want to be when you make your library. I like the idea of having a foundation, because currently we just have everything on the top level. We've got a .h and a .cpp. They're both top level. It's pretty lazy. The .h is in theory public, but we haven't really made that specific. And this nutrition.cpp is private, but we really haven't made that specific either. So I think all we're going to do really is just do a little folder structure reorganizing. So we're going to go with this foundation setup. I really kind of like that, that, because projects tend to have a lot of sub projects. So they're usually based around a main one that the project is. Like Poco had its foundation, then it had all the supporting stuff. So let's do the same thing. And keep in mind that this is not how everybody does it. I just, that's what we're going with for this example. So foundation, let's go make another couple folders here. You can make folders however you want. I'm going to make source. I'm also going to make include, and we'll put this .h in the include. We'll put this .cpp in the source. Now, sometimes you see even more subfolders of like public and private and stuff. You see that with Unreal a lot. I believe they do their stuff like that, but we're not going to do that here. We're kind of sticking to a more open source. And if we want to get any more examples of how to kind of mirror their setup, we can do that. We want a subfolder and include with the same name. Looks like they've chose to capitalize it, which I totally disagree with, because the project name is lowercase. That would throw me off. But whatever. That's fine. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do the same thing. Let's add a folder. Let's add nutrition here, and we'll put that .h in it. Now keep in mind we got to update our Cmakes too. Now if you look at this, they've got a sub Cmake here that probably tells all this how to build. So we should probably do that. And they've once again got another external lib in here. So a lot of little external libs thrown around in here to support what they're doing, because you'll see a lot of people out there these days that are like, you must build everything from the ground up from scratch. And there's definitely some merit to that, I would agree. But also, you don't want to spend your entire time developing your network library rewriting a test framework, for example. So that's why you bring in other libraries, is basically think of them as like a coworker or something. They'll generally get stuff done, but also you got to be wary, because other libraries are not perfect, because they're made by people, and people make mistakes, and if they were made by AI, they'd be even worse. But I don't want to get into that rant. So They've got samples, source. I like the idea of samples. I like the idea of test suite. I think I'm just going to stick with tests and not test suite, even though test suite sounds cool. So we're going to put this test into foundation as well. And what else do we need? We could have samples. Now, samples usually don't actually build. Usually this is just examples of how to use the library. But they actually have their samples building. Currently, our samples are basically our tests, because we have, tests that's an executable, so we can run it. But they've kind of got that separate here. They've got their samples and they've got their tests. So we're going to skip over samples for now. I think we might do that in the next episode, but I don't want to make this too awful long on you guys. So we're going to kind of just wrap this up with this restructure and this overview of the project and how you need to think, or how you should generally think about structuring it and where to find examples. I think that's basically going to be enough. So basically what we need to do now, since we've moved a bunch of files around, we need to set up our Cmake to reflect this, and that's all we're going to do for the rest of this episode. All right, so first of all, we're going to make a new Cmake in Foundation. Cmake list.txt, and that's going to kind of sub-handle a few things. I still do want to, you gotta enable testing on the top level, so that's not going to change. But we can add this subdirectory from the sub level now, and we'll put this one as just Foundation. So the top level one is going to add the subdirectory of Foundation, which will go to this Cmake, and this one will add tests. So we want to add at least some basic stuff here. Let's put our minimum version up here. 3.18 is what it defaulted to, so whatever. We're going to take this add library and put it in that subdirectory too. Our top level one is no longer doing it. And we'll put tests down here. We're going to have to correct a few little pathing issues. We'll sort that out. Let's just go back to our top one, level one, make sure it's all good. Version, project, enable testing, add subdirectory. There we go. Looks good. There's some random comments in here. I'm just going to delete them for now, because I don't think they're all that relevant. All right, and this one looks mostly fine. It just doesn't exactly have the library pathing right, so we just need to set that up. So we know that this is in source/include. Now, if we go look at Poco, let's see what they're doing. Let's look at their source. Let's see if they've got yet another Cmake in here. Looks like they don't, but sometimes you'll see it subdirectory down even further. You just need to look. But yeah, my preference would be not to. But let's also look at these includes and see if they've got any other just specific things we might need to know about. Let's give it a broad overview. It doesn't look like they're really doing anything very specific, but let's look at the Cmake list one more time, and let's find where they're doing add library. There it is. So they're adding two different libraries. They're adding a Foundation with the sources, and then they're doing another one, but they're aliasing it to the Foundation. I'm not super familiar with this, but basically I think what it does is it says, hey, this library is this library. Why are they doing that? Beats me. It's just redundant. Seems like redundant code. They probably have a reason though, so we're not going to bash it. I'm just going to say, that's something I don't really quite understand why they're doing it, but I'm sure they have their reasons. All right, and here's where they add all their sources. Looks like they got some if else, depending on specific cases of how you're building, which is fine. And they're just setting up some stuff here. So let's find sources here and see what they're setting that as. Okay, it's just this. We need to find it at the top somewhere here. Yeah, we got a list append that is constantly appending to the source depending on what they're doing. They got a glob at the top, getting all the CPP. They got another glob getting all the .h's. So that's interesting that they're using some glob stuff. You often hear don't use glob, so it's interesting to see that here. But that's fine. Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing too, just because we're being a little lazy. So we could do this whole file thing as well. And maybe we'll do that later. But basically all they do is they grab all files of that type and add them. So maybe we'll go ahead and do that. So let's go File, This kind of makes it a little future-proof. You just got to make sure you refresh your Cmake. Do we copy their terminology? That's something we got to decide. Actually, we're doing like exactly this. So I don't know what source. I don't know what this G stands for. Global source is G. I don't know. I would. I'm gonna call it P for private. You know, maybe they've got a reason for the G. I don't know what it is. To me personally, P makes more sense for private because I don't know what they're doing. And they've got some other stuff going. Poco sources auto. So they've got some Cmake files imported here. That's kind of a deep Cmake thing, but they've probably got them in here. Yeah. They've probably got some functions or something somewhere that they're calling. I don't know exactly where those are going to be, but just kind of keep that in mind that you'll see special stuff. And you don't necessarily need to fully understand it, but it'd be nice to find where this is. I could probably dig in and find it. Basically, it sounds like it just appends to the sources. And that's probably what this is doing too. I don't know. We're not going to worry about that too much. We're just going to kind of hard code it in quickly. Let's do a recurse on this one. Oh, what am I doing? Don't need double glob. So glob recurse goes down through all the file structures. I'm not even going to put these P and H on there. We're just not going into that sort of detail in this project. So we want to go into the include and then star.h. And now because it is recurse, it should also look down into this subfolder. We just need to make sure we reference these. So instead of hard coding them here on this add library, we're going to end up doing basically both of these. To call these variables and get everything out of them, you got to surround it with the curly braces. Guess I'll zoom in, better late than never. And same thing here, the headers. So now we should be adding our library correctly, should be adding our test correctly. And if everything went to plan, we're good. I think we need to do an add subdirectory. Well, no, we should be good. Let's just generate and see if this works. I didn't see any errors, didn't see any on the error list. Let's go to our test explorer, see if that's happy. It is. It was. Okay, so what we can do if we want to build these individually is just switch this to the solution, other solution view, go to Cmake targets, check out our targets here. We got our library and we got our tester. Let's go ahead and just build this library. Cannot include file. Okay, so yeah, this is kind of important to know. Now, obviously, we've put our header and CPP files in different folders, pretty vastly different, but they do need to know about each other. Like this one still wants to know this header. So you can like hard path to it. You can go, you know, back a directory, now into include, now into nutrition, and now into the actual header there. So that'll fix it. But if you don't want to do all this, like in this library, you know, we always want access to this include. So we can just put that in our Cmake below the add library with target include directories. And the target is this guy here. We want public, they're public libraries, and we just need the path. So if we're in a Cmake project, we'll go Cmake root dir. Oh, I think it's actually source dir. I always forget this one. And that is going to give you the path to basically your top level Cmake. It's going to give you the folder that your top level Cmake is in. So no matter what one you're in, it's going to get you that top level right there. So we know from the top level, we then go into foundation. If we don't want to typo those, we can just copy these folder names. No risk of typo when you copy pasta. Include, and then all the way down. You don't necessarily have to go all the way down, but we are in this case. And now I'm going to surround this by double quotes. I'm not entirely sure if you need to do that. It seems to have mixed results on that. So let's see if this now compiles, because now if we go back to here, we shouldn't need this path because it has it in its include directories now. All right, so let's go back to our solution here and just go to our targets view and see if we can go ahead and build our main library. And just right click and do that again. Looks like it builds. Let's build our tester. Build. It can't open a directory. Okay, so same thing with our tester. Let's address that. We'll get this compiling here. So our tester also wants to find this header. So we can do a similar thing. Well, we can also just path to it like we did originally, or we could take this little Cmake and do the same thing as this one. Take these include directories, put it in there. Anywhere after the add executable is fine. Let's put it right here. Seems like a good order. Make sure you get the right names since we do a copy paste. And there we go. We go right to it. So it might be the case that you only want to go in your test to include, and that's fine. That just means you have to make sure prefaces with the folder you left out. Up to you how you do that. A lot of people like leaving the folder in front because it makes a little more clarity as to what library you're bringing in. For example, there's a lot of common file names that come up. For example, a lot of libraries end up having a file called bitset.h. So if you want to know where you're getting your bitset.h, for example, keeping the folder in front is nice because there's a gazillion bitset.h's out there. Just an example. But we've got it simple enough that it's just a single file, so we're just going to go all the way to it. But just wanted to make you aware that that's a thing. I don't know if you need the trailing slash at all right there. I don't think you do, but it seems to work fine either way. Okay, so let's go to our test explorer, hit play. Our tests still aren't filled out completely. Did we not save this file? Oh, I corrected the path. We got to correct that again. Okay, now we should see some tests if everything goes well. Oh, we're still getting some kind of error. I think we just need to force a rebuild here. No work on the library. Let's build the tests. Test succeeds. Okay, and there we go. We got our little test going on. So the test is working. It's relinking. We got it restructured. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode about, I think this is kind of a nice step, I think. Just kind of understanding some structure stuff so that you can continue on. But once you got it structured how you want, basically, you do what you want. You keep adding to your program, keep adding to your library, and we'll talk about more later. Now, I didn't really have any comments from the last video that were relevant to libraries and stuff, so I'm not really sure what questions to answer, but please let me know if you have any or if anything's confusing. I'll try to wrap those up in future episodes so that this works as kind of a complete YouTube University type course. All right, well, that's all I got for this one. Hope you've enjoyed. If you got a lot out of this, consider supporting the channel. It would mean a lot for me continuing these in the future. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.